Okay, so tonight we're going to be looking at verses 10 through to and including verse 12, which I shall read to you. Sorry, that's wrong. From verse 9 through to verse 12.
What, chapter 4?
Chapter 4, yeah. So, chapter 4 of 1 Thessalonians and verses 9 through to 12. But as touching brotherly love, ye need not that I write unto you, for ye yourselves are taught of God to love one another. And indeed ye do it toward all the brethren which are in all Macedonia. But we beseech you, brethren, that ye increase more and more, and that ye study to be quiet, and to do your own business, and to work with your own hands, as we commanded you, that ye may walk honestly towards them that are without, and that ye may have lack of nothing. So, just a few short verses, really. But as is often the case with these, when you actually reflect upon them, when you think about them, there's lots of things that we can learn even just from these few short verses. So once again the theme is love, isn't it? You know, just it's never stopping really throughout the whole of the New Testament. The theme is love, not what doctrine do you have, what denomination are you? I'm not saying doctrine's not important, obviously it is, but again, the theme is love. You know, this is the thing that underpins the whole of the gospel and the new covenant. Is this love, and we're talking about brotherly love here. And what I find interesting is that Paul, of course, who is an apostle, says, "As touching brotherly love," in other words, concerning brotherly love, "you need not that I write to you. For ye yourselves are taught of God to love one another." So this tells me that God teaches us directly in certain things. You know, that we don't need a man to tell us what God's will is. Not even an apostle. Now he could mean one of two things when he says God teaches you this. He could be saying God teaches you directly to your heart. In other words, God you just know when you become a Christian, the Holy Spirit is teaching and showing you about this brotherly love, that it's kind of almost spiritually instinctive, and God is teaching you this through His Spirit. Or he could be saying God is teaching you this without the apostles, directly through the scriptures. So, I mean, I think it's both, I'll be honest. But what's interesting is, if it is talking about the scriptures, then we're talking about the Old Testament scriptures here. And the association in a lot of people's mind, because the New Testament isn't complete this time. So in a lot of people's minds, the Old Testament teaches about judgment, wrath, plagues, and it does talk about the wrath of God, and it does talk about punishment. And yet here Paul is saying, if he is referring to the scriptures, that it teaches you about love, and it teaches you about brotherly love. So where in the Old Testament does it talk about love? Well, a whole number of places, really. But let's have a look at Deuteronomy chapter 5. Let me see. So let's just start at verse 17, which of course is the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, neither shalt thou commit adultery, neither shalt thou steal, neither shalt thou bear false witness against thy neighbour, neither shalt thou desire thy neighbour's wife, neither shalt thou covet thy neighbour's house, his field, or his manservant, or his maidservant, his ox, or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbour's. And again, we could have looked at Exodus chapter 20, where again we've got, this is the second reading of the law, so we've got it in Exodus first. And of course Jesus sort of puts it all together, if you like, in Matthew 22. Remember, he's drawing on the Old Testament here. Matthew 22 and 30, 37, well, 36 we'll go from. So this lawyer, it says, someone who's an expert in the law, says, Master, addressing Jesus, verse 36, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. So again, it just condenses what I was saying. If you love your neighbour, you're not going to steal, you're not going to commit adultery against them, and so on. And verse 40, Jesus says, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So all the law, all the teaching of the prophets, you can hang, he's saying, on these two moral statements. I think it was William Tyndale who said that you can condense the whole of the moral law of the Old Testament into the Ten Commandments. And then you can condense, I think he uses the word condense, but something similar, you can condense the Ten Commandments into what Jesus is saying here in Matthew 22. So we've got the Old Testament revealed here in the New Testament, explained by Jesus, and it's further explained by Paul in Romans 13. And it's quite conspicuous here, and particularly I think in the King James it is. So Romans 13 verse 7 rather, there is no verse 17. So Romans 13 verse 7, render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honour to whom honour, owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. Oh, back to the law again. For this, verse 9, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbour, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. It's brilliant, isn't it? It's now saying, if you love God with everything, and you love your neighbour with everything, then you fulfil that law. And so, does the Old Testament teach us about brotherly love? Yes, it does. But here's something that's interesting, I think, is that another thing that it demonstrates, if when Paul says you are taught of God to love one another, if he is referring to the Old Testament, the church in Thessalonica is largely Gentile. So he's actually saying this old covenant and this teaching of the Old Testament, actually God is teaching you Gentiles. And what that does, I think, is it at least puts a very strong question mark against what I think are mistaken theologies like dispensationalism. Well, the Old Testament's only for the Jews. I would argue this is a demonstration that it isn't. The whole of the Bible is for believers, and this is a demonstration of it. So you're taught by God to love one another. And I think we'd all, agree with that. Yeah, we need to love one another. It's one of the first things that people, when they become Christians, often talk about. I was just filled with this love for God and then a love for other people, and even people who up until that point, I maybe not despised, but you didn't get on with and so on, and suddenly there was this kind of love, even an affection for them, a forgiveness towards them, and that is part of what God can do in the human heart. He can reconcile us to other people. He can enable us to forgive. Even awful things that have happened. God can change our heart, can enable us to do that, and it puts it in. I think it's in Ezekiel where it says he will take away your stony heart and give you a heart of flesh. In other words, he'll take away that hard heart that has become sort of calloused by sin and give you a gentle heart, a loving heart, a heart of flesh. So there's this sense in which we're changed, but Paul says you are loving one another and all the brethren in Macedonia, but we beseech you that you increase more and more. So that love is not just like, oh yeah, I've got it. I've got a love for God. I've got a love for my brothers and sisters in Christ. I've got it. No, Paul's saying no. It needs to increase. You need to be, if you like, cultivating that, working on it. And allowing God to cause that to grow. And that is a part, I think, of spiritual maturity, as much as understanding the Bible, familiarising yourself with the Bible, becoming resilient in faith and so on. It is also growing in love towards one another. That love deepening. So 1 Thessalonians 4, back to where we're at, and verse 10. So increase more and more. Verse 11, and that ye study to be quiet and to do your own business and to work with your own hands as we commanded you. It's quite a funny kind of phrase, really, that you study to be quiet. To study, the word really means here to be ambitious. To be ambitious to do what? To do your own business. To be quiet. To use a common phrase, to mind your own business. The implication is that Christians should quietly be getting on with their lives, not interfering with other people, but we should be that should be our ambition, to live quietly. Elsewhere in the New Testament talks about living at peace with others, as long as it depends upon you, because you can't always do that, because we also read that Christians, those who want to live godly, will suffer persecution. So it may be that you can't live quietly because of other people, but as far as it depends upon you, try and live at peace with everybody. Try and live quietly. Let that be your own ambition. And so a bit later on in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, it says Paul criticises those in Thessalonica, and he says, "For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies." Busybodies. So in other words, they're not busy with their own kind of business. They are busybodies. So a busybody is somebody who interferes in everybody else's business. And Paul also warns Timothy, and he gives an example in Timothy of young widows, and he says there is a danger that they learn to be idle, wandering from house to house, and not only idle but tattlers also, and there's that word again, busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. 1 Timothy 5:13 if you're taking notes. So why young widows? Well, I guess I mean I don't know why the young and they're widows. Maybe they've been involved in a war or something. There's a lot of fighting going on, isn't there, at this time? And maybe their husband died young and left them as widows. But in their culture, in their society, now they haven't got a man to care for, to occupy them. Presumably they died young enough that they didn't have children that they'd be looking after. So now they've got all this time on their hands, and they've become idle. They've become busybodies. I think the implication here is gossip and wasting their time. And of course, the Scripture tells us to redeem the time. And here Paul is saying, study, be ambitious to be quiet, to get on with your business. Don't involve yourself in everybody else's business. Don't be a gossip, and don't, basically be diligent in the right things. And this kind of diligence is important, I think, for Christians. Verse 12 says that you may walk honestly toward them that are without. In other words, those who are outside the church, those who are... And by the way, this is a reminder that there are people who are outside of your community, the church. There are people who are outside of your relationship. Not everybody, you're not associating with everybody in the world with loads of non-Christians. There is you, your brothers and sisters in Christ, and then there are those who are outside or who are without. And he's saying you need to be able to walk honestly towards those that are without, that you may lack nothing. Because one of the criticisms of Christians is, they're kind of lazy. Because I'll give you an example of what I mean. When I used to work at my last job, one of the guys there said, "So what do you do at your church?" So I said, "Well, we sing songs, we pray, we study the Bible together, we go out and share the gospel with other people." And he kind of frowned at me and went, "Yeah, but what do you do?" And so there was this kind of, it's like, to him, that wasn't doing anything. That was just like, well, what's the point of doing that? Mm. And so I think what Paul is implying is, yes, do all those things. Keep doing those things. But in your temporal business, in your sort of secular business, in the things that you do, whether it's, social worker, keeper at home, even pastor, work hard, be diligent, do the job properly. Don't just kind of have an idol or a sort of, what do they call it, lackadaisical, is that the right word? Kind of laissez-faire. Just be diligent, work hard, so that with people who are outside, they can see your work. And they won't be able to criticise. They won't have that. They can't criticise you for being idle or lazy or so on, or head in the clouds and all this sort of stuff. Show yourself diligent in these other things. And in fact, there's a verse in Colossians 3:23. Whatsoever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, and not unto men. So he's saying, even if you've got a job which has no kind of Christian or spiritual meaning to it, really, let's say, for example, you sweep the streets, and people who do, then do it as if you're doing it for God. Do it as if you're doing it for the Lord, and that can be a form of worship, really, if you do it from the heart, and if you do it heartily as to the Lord. So let us redeem the time. Let us work harder than worldly people, even those who have made it their career, and that's where all their energy goes. Our energy is split, isn't it? We're not, this is my job, this is my career, and this is all I do. It comes before everything else. I'm here to make money. Our loyalties, in a sense, are split in that we have responsibilities like prayer, Bible study, fellowship, evangelistic, albeit informal for some, sharing the gospel with people. So we do have these other duties, but even our secular work, even the things that we do that are not directly spiritual, can be a form of worship. They can be a way in which we can please God, and they can also, I guess, be a witness and a testimony, to those who don't know God, that they see how hard we work, how diligent we are, how honest we are in our labour, in our endeavours, and that is testimony to God. It reminded me a little bit of, in 1 Corinthians, I think it is, where it talks about marriage between a believer and an unbeliever, and it talks about winning over the unbeliever by your behaviour, just by they see your kind of godly character, and they admire that, and there is a sense in which even when you're working, even when you're doing a job, if you can do it without getting frustrated and angry or swearing or whatever it is, setting a good example is it can bring honour to Christ. And I think that's what, and I mean, he says here about work with your own hands, verse 11, do your own business. Again, look after your own business. Don't be a busybody meddling in everybody else's business, but to work with your own hands. Now, some people have interpreted that absolutely literally. You've got to have a job where you're a craftsman or something like that. I think that is because probably that was the sort of job that they had in Thessalonica. I don't think it literally means you have to be involved in craft, although you can be. But it just means, whatever your work is, and even if it's, going out to work, working for yourself, running your own business, being a housewife or whatever, then just do it with all diligence as unto the Lord.